Former Democratic Governor of Alabama, Don Siegelman, may have summed it up. Karl Rove, he said, is one of those who can lie under oath and take a lie detector and pass it. With that as a backdrop, our third story in the countdown, Rove testifying under oath about the 2006 Bush administration political purge of 9 U.S. attorneys. Warning, your truth mileage may vary. Grilled for no less than 8 hours yesterday by House Judiciary Committee lawyers about his role in those firings. After the deposition, Rove's attorney, Robert Luskin, issued this statement to NBC News and MSNBC. The agreement setting up the interviews contemplated that they would remain entirely confidential until all the interviews were complete. Out of respect for that term of the agreement, Mr. Rove is not commenting. Respectful. It took him nearly 2 years just to get him to comment to the investigators. Rove was first subpoenaed by the committee in 2007, but the Bush White House asserted executive privilege for Rove and then White House counsel Harriet Miers. Only after a bargain among the Obama White House, the Bush White House, and the Judiciary Committee did Rove even talk on the record. The firings began to take shape in 2005 with then White House counsel Miers, Attorney General Alberto Gonzales, and Justice Department official Kyle Sampson talking about replacing all 93 U.S. attorneys. When they figured out that might have been too obvious, the trio allegedly settled on firing 8 of the prosecutors in all and 7 on December 7th, 2006. But according to emails from Bush administration officials, it was Rove who actually came up with the idea. First Miers, then Sampson, finally Gonzales resigned. Rove has not been touched, possibly that is until now. He is expected to appear before the committee for a second time at the end of the month. Let's turn now to the Washington editor of The Nation magazine, Chris Hayes. Chris, good evening.
Good evening, Keith.
So which is this? Is this the start of something big, or is this kind of an anachronistic postscript?
Well, I hope it's the former, but I fear it's the latter. I mean, committeeman, the chairman John Conyers has shown an admirable fidelity to truth and accountability, and I think he's been pursuing this sort of quietly but zealously in a way that I hope bears some fruit. But the fact of the matter is, if we're going to actually open up the books and open up the chapters in the last 8 years of what happened in this country, particularly around secrecy, around the sort of malfeasance of the Department of Justice, what happened in the national security state, intelligence, all of that needs to be wrenched out in the light, and there has to be a broad political constituency for that. And that's not what I see right now, particularly not in Washington and certainly not among Democratic leadership.
Well, and that goes to the point of what we began this news hour with the breaking news about the CIA report. And there's a back and forth here about what Leon Panetta said in a private briefing about which no one will tell us what it's about. And the 6 members of this committee say they were told that, yes, we at the CIA, we misled you. And Panetta says, no, I didn't say misled. I said we just simply didn't brief you sufficiently. And exactly that nuance decides which side is to be believed. And I would presume there are parallels, although we don't have any evidence of it yet. I would assume there are parallels to that in the Rove case and what he is going to testify and what people will interpret him doing, whether it is nefarious or potentially innocent.
Yeah, that's right. I think that's a really good point. I mean, there's a certain amount of sort of political hardening around people's opinions of these matters, and they're disposed to feel one way or the other. But it's interesting, you raised Panetta, and Rove fits into this as well, and him being deposed today. I've been doing some reporting recently on the Church Committee back in the mid-1970s, and it really becomes evident that there was a real, from different sectors of the elites, of the establishment, of the Beltway, politically, there was a push for some real dragging things out into the sunlight and having an actual process of reckoning with how we're going to manage this tension between sort of secrecy and democracy. And as a whole, as a sort of major conceptual enterprise, that's not being undertaken. And, John Conyers deserves all the credit in the world, but he is kind of a lone warrior in this enterprise. And unless there's a broader consensus politically, I don't think we're going to get a whole lot out of this.
And if you study the history of the CIA, you can say that at least the Frank Church's efforts bought the country 10 years, maybe 15 years worth of relative honesty out of an organization that had never been asked to provide any of that. All right, back to Rove here. Cast our memories back there. The real motivation, the down-the-road payoff for the Republicans, if the whole plan would have worked, if Rove's plan would have worked, was what?
Well, the most dystopic vision of it would have been one in which the independence of the Department of Justice would be completely compromised, in which the mechanism of the administration of the prosecutorial function of the American government would be brought wholly within the purview of the President of the United States and his staff, and they would decide at a whim who to prosecute and when, and that would be utterly, utterly un-American and corrosive to our entire system of justice. At a more sort of banal level, what's really interesting about these individual cases, and David Iglesias, who's one of the men fired, speaks to this, these were in some ways kind of payoffs to local Republican cronies. So this was part of the economy of influence, part of the kind of paybacks to local bigwigs around the country that Karl Rove was managing from the White House.
And lastly, and briefly, I have to mention this, Alberto Gonzales, at the center of all this, has a new job. He's going to teach at Texas Tech University, and this, of course, begs the reminder that Texas Tech is the place Bob Knight went to coach basketball after he shamed himself out of real jobs, too.
It's really too perfect, isn't it? I mean, you know, Alberto Gonzales deserves to be cast out of polite society, and the same is true of you and Bybee and other people that participated in this, and I hope that happens.
Yeah, that's John. You're not referring to me personally.
Yeah.
I may deserve to be cast out.
There
but
are some who feel that way, Keith.
You're not gonna get the choice on doing that, Hayes. Chris Hayes of The Nation. Always a pleasure. Thanks, Chris.
You too, Keith.